This is Abe Friedtanzer from Awards Buzz, and I'm very excited to be speaking with Bill Pullman about Murdaugh Murders, the movie. How are you, Bill?
Pretty good. Great to be talking to you, Abe.
So this is a very recent news story. How aware were you of what was happening at the time?
Well, I was probably one of a very small percentage of population in America that was following the Murdaugh murders. It was a huge sensation, I realized, but I had to bone up on it pretty fast because the offer came in to look at this thing. I just heard the log line. It was a true life crime thing, and a guy murders his wife and his son. And I thought, I'm not doing it. I can't get my head around how that would happen right now. And then I said, well, I got to look at the script. And then I read this script, and it kind of possessed me a little bit. It was very uncanny and how it felt real. And later, I was investigating. I realized so much of it was verbatim from all the cameras that were all over the story and that had been made, made the story kind of like accessible for a lot of people. And that Netflix 4-part series was, really um, uh, a lot of it was because this was an unusually well photographed event. It was, they had the 911 call and the body cam on the arresting officer, the first officer on the scene that night, and dash cams and all kinds of things. And then in the courtroom, South Carolina is one of the few states, or that have cameras in the courtroom. And right now everybody loved to be in that courtroom with Trump and what's going on. But, this one in with Murdaugh's trial, that was all on camera, hours and hours and hours. So I had to dive into it pretty quick. And then I really became mesmerized by the thing like everybody else had.
Well, it's really interesting because the nature of the crime and everything, it's quite simple in some ways, and also the all the financial crimes and everything, it seems like it's happening a lot longer ago because no one's tracing anything, but then you have all these cell phones and all that footage, so it's an interesting sort of like modern story that could have taken place years ago also, I feel like. Do you get that sense at all?
Yeah, yeah, there is something about the way that it hit people as it was unfolding that made it particularly unique because there was a real peeling back the onion month by month by month for like a year, 2 years, really. There, it kept turning up new things that had been under the carpet. And, for people that had been, I realized that once I could kind of look back over the months, but that sensation people had of like, wow, this is a weird story. This is story just got stranger. And I think largely it's because, there's a level of con artist, that was so successful, and you wonder about all the people around him for so many years that really weren't picking up on it. And then all the his attempts to um escape some guilt, you were just so, you know so raw and so bold, I guess, that it was an unusual con story, I guess.
You mentioned that a lot of the script is verbatim. How important was it for you to mimic the real person, or do you feel like this is a sort of fictionalized version or your own take on him?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I really had been around, have done some uh, real life characters, Dark Waters, and played on Too Big to Fail, played Jamie Dimond, and real people that you can see all the video for and everything. And but for me, I wasn't interested in doing a mimicry of him, partly because it was so impossible with the setup that we had, we had to shoot it pretty fast in order to get it shot before the pending strike drop dead of the, you know, if we don't have an agreement in the Actors SAG Guild, we'd have to stop production. So that really made the whole thing very condensed. And I didn't have time to do for one thing, his weight loss was so huge, we would have had to do a lot more that way. And so I said to my agent, I said, well, before we go any further, I just want to make sure that nobody's there looking for mimicry. I'm going to have my version of it, which is, anchored in things that would, reflect him, but didn't have to be exactly. But I end up, when you have all that footage, it really ends up it becomes, I was more inside it than I ever thought I was, I was going to be when I was starting out. So, but I think, the emotional, when I told people that I was going to do this part, I was going to do this part with, friends and people who had been following the story, they said, oh, I hate that guy. Oh, I know he was a liar. I could see, and I could see he was lying. And I thought, this is a hard story to tell if everybody's already got him guilty. So I think the challenge was not to play into that, uh, to, kind of mimic the same conditions that allowed so many people to not question, what him, and especially in the first months after the murders. And I think then the story becomes a little can be told a little more successfully.
I also think we see a difference in part one and part two, where part one, he's really projecting this image of confidence and really a nice guy. And then you start to really see the unraveling in part two. Was that a conscious split, or was everything just sort of filmed together and that's sort of how the story goes?
Well, it really, yeah, there was an increased vice squeezing him. And so that was just natural in the progression of the story. But there was, I think, in a deliberate attempt from Greg Beeman, the director, who's a very good director, that was really interested in how he was going to shoot it. And he really kept that camera kind of very, portrait and formal and whatnot. And then as the um, story progresses, it becomes more and more subjective, and then the pressures and handheld starts to come into it. And yeah, I thought that was good. We were kind of having to shoot so fast, because and it wouldn't have been really possible if he hadn't been such a open to suggestions, open to, let's get going. First rehearsal on the set would be inside the scene, behaving in the room, and he'd give me the layout of the room, and we would just not just stand and say the words and then, okay, you go here, you go here. It was already in action, by the first rehearsal even. So.
Well, I've been following your career for a long time now, and as soon as I knew I'd be speaking with you, I flashed back to a movie that's almost 30 years old, Independence Day. And my wife said, what about While You Were Sleeping? Do you feel like those two films have really followed you a lot through your career and people bring them up a lot when they're talking to you or seeing you on the street?
It's always different, Abe. I guess according to the generations and according to who they are, I can almost spot when somebody's coming up, that there's a few other movies that just keep, I can never tell whether it's going to be uh, Independence Day or While You're Sleeping or Casper or Spaceballs or, you know, somebody a couple of months ago, I heard talk about them as evergreen movies, movies that seem to have they live, they're not deciduous. They keep their leaves all year long. So.
Well, I also was thinking about a much less evergreen movie, I think, but one that's still very fascinating from more recently, which is Surveillance. And I think that's just such a intense head trip. I don't want to say too much. People haven't seen it, but how much does that film stick in your brain? And do people ever bring that one up to you?
There's certain people that have, vivid impression of that movie. And I think it's always one, that comes up when somebody says, well, um, you've somehow managed to have this nice guy image in spite of the fact we have a lot of evidence on film of you behaving otherwise, Bill. So surveillance is, this edgy story with Jennifer Lynch directed it, David Lynch produced it, and it was, a raw, naked thing that had a lot of con about it, and the reversals towards the end, I think, that's pretty surprising. So I'm always glad to hear that one referenced. It's one of my son's favorites.
Well, is there any performance of yours that you've given over the years in some project that people never ask you about that you wish really people were taking a closer look at and you could speak about more?
Yeah, those ones you just can't believe they have the bad luck of despairing, evaporating, and nobody's seen them before. One is I did a movie that never got released officially, but it can be found, and it's called Your Name Here, and I play Philip K. Dick in the last 3 days of his life, and it was really a torture to me that it was made on very little budget, and but it got snagged by a lot of other issues that kept it from being released at the time. But it is a trip, and he's such a formidable person. I really enjoyed that part, but that's not gonna come back.
Well, I don't know how much you watch in terms of stuff that you're not in, but at Awards Buzz, we love awards. So I'm curious if there's any performance or series that you've watched recently that you think is especially awards worthy.
Well, I think there's a lot of good acting going on now, and I haven't really been watching a lot up till the um, voting starts. I've got a different attitude towards it all, but there's been some for television performances. There's quite a few. Um, it's a really lively medium, and there's definitely a lot of things that I've enjoyed, with the uh, just different things. The Bear is a great series, and um, I think there is just all the ones that I haven't yet dug deep to the performances. I have been hearing a lot about the fourth season of Fargo that I want to watch, and it's an actress in there that I've been following for a long time. So there's a lot of performances that I'm really excited to see as I get more and more into it.
Well, given your deep dive into Alex Murdaugh, I'm sure that starting late will not be a disadvantage because it seems like you're able to go in pretty hard when you need to.
Yeah. It's gets to be a thing that I take a week and get really down on, so that I can kind of keep them all together in my head too. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Bill. It's a pleasure to speak with you, and I look forward to doing it again sometime.
Great, Ed. Really good to talk to you too.